We'll get this rock and rolling. All right, here we go. So today we're joined by Krista-Marie at Med Spa Advisors, who was our former Dean of Education here at the Texas Laser Institute, went off and did her own amazing consultancy, and is now helping med spas throughout the world, it seems, but certainly throughout America, and particularly here in Texas. We have a fantastic focus on the rules and the regulatory environment and compliance that medical spa operators need to become familiar with when opening and running their own medical spas. So I'll introduce to you here, Krista, and so glad to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us today.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much.
Well,
I'm excited about our little podcast today, and hopefully we'll share some valuable information to the public.
Yes, ma'am.
And give them an insight a little bit about Med Spa Advisor and what we're all about.
I love it. Absolutely. I mean, as a school, as you know, from years ago, we received just a nonstop barrage of phone calls, a nonstop chain of phone calls every day about folks wanting to get into the industry. And normally the first question is about rules and regulations. And then, of course, the school, we certainly help to assist with the understanding of laser licensure particularly, but as an institution, we're careful not to try to provide customized legal advice or services, but speak very broadly about various components of medical aesthetics. But Krista's firm is able to, I think, much better guide folks into some of the specifics that as a school we don't do. So if somebody calls you for the very first time, hey, look at opening up a med spa. What are my first steps? What's the gist? What's the initial introduction?
Yeah, well, of course, we appreciate anyone calling us and asking for advice. And usually they have heard about Med Spa Advisor through some referral program, whether it be from social media or friends. But we do ask, some basic questions when someone calls in, really about where you're located, what kind of services are you planning to offer, are you already in the industry, is this something new for you, and gather that information to sort of figure out how we're going to guide them. There's many of a startup that comes through that they're literally brand new to the industry, and there's a lot to learn. And what Med Spa Advisor really focuses on is not only showing them where the rules and regulations are. We're not attorneys, we don't provide legal advice, but we do provide sort of what I like to say, the hound dogging, where we have already looked up all of these rules and regs, and I'm very much a part of this stuff when it happens in Austin, and basically show them how to comply if they want to get into this space, this wonderful, amazing space, then how to comply with the different agencies that may have a say in their business.
Makes sense. I mean, I remember almost 10 years ago, you and I working very closely with what then used to regulate laser hair removal, DSHS here in Texas,
right,
and helping to really guide and shape the implementation of those rules and regulations. And it's certainly changed quite a bit since then.
It has.
It has changed. What are some of the high-level things you think folks should be initially familiar with when operating a medical spa that perhaps goes beyond laser hair removal, but maybe into body contouring or perhaps even facial injectable procedures like Botox, Juvederm,
right?
What have you?
Well, we do have two words here that we're talking about: med and spa. Most of these med spas are a hybrid. So they may have some treatments that are considered the practice of medicine in the state of Texas, and then some treatments that are not, that are more on the spa side, which could be regulated by TDLR. So we have, OSHA, the medical board, TDLR, the health department. All of these agencies may have some sort of hand in your business as a med spa. And what we like to do is guide you and show you where these rules are. In a high level, a lot of times they don't understand, just the basic stuff like insurance. Oh my gosh, forgot about that. Well, if you're not insured, you're not doing anything at all. What kind of marketing and advertising? Where should I be located? Where's the money? What kind of staff should I have? Do I need a medical director? All of those questions are very common.
Oh, yes. So it seems that your services go far beyond just the regulatory construct, but certainly,
Yes,
how are you going to structure and put policies and procedures into place to actually run your medical spa? Let's
that's
talk about
right.
those rules and regs. You mentioned, I think, the Texas Medical Board certainly being one regulatory authority or agency to be aware of. Are there other ones too that folks need to become familiar with when they go into this type of business?
Yeah, yeah. So for instance, if you're going to do the med part of the med spa, you've got under the medical board, many procedures, the majority of them fall under their jurisdiction
Yeah.
under the 193.17 rule for non-surgical medical cosmetic procedures. So that would include things like cosmetic injections, anything that you're doing with a laser or a light except for hair removal, your microneedling, any type of invasive or minimally invasive treatment, your microneedling, your plasma pins, all of those things are considered the practice of medicine. And we have specific steps that we have to follow as med spa in order to provide those procedures. The health department has their own division where when it comes to lasers, there's certain classifications of lasers, class 3B and 4, which are a little bit more dangerous and typically found in med spas. Those machines have to have a location registration. Where is it, is what the health department wants to know. And this could be a hospital system carrying class 3B or 4 lasers, a LASIK surgeon, a med spa. These are, it's just a business registration, and the state wants to know where that's at. The health department also has, in a lot of businesses, med spa, the hybrid. They may offer things that are really popular, like microblading, where they put ink into the eyebrows and make little strokes, or permanent makeup. Those are also under the jurisdiction of the health department in their own tattoo and body piercing area, where they do require a business to be registered. So a med spa, depending on how many services they offer, could have a license for laser hair removal as a business. They could have a license for a machine registration from the health department,
Yeah.
a license for body, or I'm sorry, for tattoo and body art and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So far we have the Department for Laser Hair Removal is the TDLR, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Then you mentioned the Health Department, so that's DSHS, right? Department of State
Yeah,
Health.
Department of State Health Services.
Then, of course, we have the TMB, Texas Medical Board, and particularly that Rule 193.17 that folks have to be familiar with. And then I'm sure folks probably come to you. Do they ever come to you with OSHA considerations or concerns as well? Or?
Well, and that's a great question, because many people forget you've got to be compliant with OSHA.
Yes.
And part of our compliance training does include OSHA. There is a branch of the Department of Insurance in Texas called OSHCON, and they handle the OSHA aspect here in the state. And one of our webinars is to show a medical spa how to be compliant. And OSHCON has listened into our webinar, and we were very thorough. In fact, they said a little more thorough than they were. So we know that coming through Med Spa Advisor, when you do your OSHA training with us, which is done simply through webinars and template forms, we provide you what you need.
Yeah.
You'll pass an OSHA inspection, and we even invite you to call OSHA. They love to come out and check you, and they're not coming out with a violation pad. They're coming out to make sure that if there's anything they can do to help you, they'll make sure that you're correct. We've been fortunate to have no complaints from anybody that has taken our OSHA training.
That's absolutely fantastic. So that's another agency. And then are we leaving any off the table right now for a typical?
Well, just remember, TDLR has 39 occupations that they're a licensing agency. In our space, not only do they have laser hair removal, they also have massage therapy, which could be part of a med spa,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And they also have the cosmetology umbrella,
Exactly
which
right.
then that below that you'll have your estheticians and your nails and so on. So there may be several different departments of one agency, TDLR especially, that has a say in your business, and you may have a different inspector for different said treatments.
So no, exactly right. So you might have from one agency, one individual possessing 2 or 3 different licenses within
That's
your
right.
clinic, perhaps an esthetician, a laser technician, a massage therapist. But then the
Mm-hmm.
facility itself, I think, has its own license, correct?
That's right. There would be a salon license for your cosmetology services in the umbrella. It could be a specialty salon or a mini salon. And then you have your massage therapy business license as well, laser hair removal business license. So we have licensed individuals that go through an appropriate approved schools such as Texas Laser Institute to obtain the training they're looking for, such as laser hair removal, and they become licensed. But the business itself has to be licensed as well. And in order to do that, they need to have licensed individuals working for them.
Absolutely. So that speaks, I think, directly to being able to perform these procedures. And then, of course, you have local licenses and occupational permits for your actual facility, depending upon where you're located in Texas, particularly. If you have to have a fire inspection from the local fire marshal to do a
Right.
safety inspection in certain cities or
That's right.
geographical areas. So
And
there's
zoning is another thing. You may have, people don't realize, for instance, to get a tattoo parlor license, which would be your permanent makeup or microblading, you actually have to have the approval of your city zoning division because some cities don't allow tattooing.
exactly
And
right.
they put the permanent makeup and the microblading in the same box.
Yes, I do.
So in order to register a business as a tattoo parlor, you actually have to submit from your city an approval that you are zoned for that service.
Yeah, particularly that city requires zoning. Harris County is pretty lucky here in Houston because we don't have zoning. It's pretty easy to fulfill that requirement with DSHS, but for most of Texas, that's certainly one more step that
Yes,
you have to do to do.
there's certain cities that just flat out don't allow tattooing.
Yeah, yeah,
And even though the state says it's okay, but if the city zoning says it's not, the state won't issue a license.
you're not going to get your license for that. Exactly right. So we have covered, I think, just about every agency, at least the predominant ones that are going to directly regulate and impact one's business. You had mentioned insurance. I'm sure we get phone calls all the time too. What kind of insurance do I need? And where am I going to get it? Want to talk a little bit about that and give folks a little bit of
Yeah.
introduction to the insurance policies that
Oh, yeah. A lot of people are simply confused about insurance. They don't understand what they need.
Yeah.
They don't understand the difference between business facility insurance, like your general liability, somebody's in your facility, slips, falls, hurts themselves, property insurance. And then we have our profession, what we are doing as a job, professional liability. And that insurance policy is going to cover all the different services that your med spa would offer and who is performing them,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
A lot of times people say, well, I've got an insurance policy, but I always say, did you really read that policy? Do you really know what you're covered for? And I'll give you an example. There's an exclusions area where they say you're covered, but excluding several different things. One of those that people don't realize is, let's say, Botox. You may have an exclusion that says you can't inject Botox off label, which means uses in areas that are not FDA approved. They may have an exclusion there. Or if you're using a compounded numbing cream, they may exclude you. Now this stuff is negotiable, but the layperson or the one that's not experienced with insurance just gets the policy, doesn't read the fine print, and maybe there is an incident and they're not covered.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very
So
important.
yeah.
When you go to complete that application for your professional policy, particularly, there's usually a med spa rider component, addendum, or supplemental application that they'll submit to you. And it typically will guide you through a lot of those types of considerations. But you're right, you can perhaps work through a broker that's not as familiar with this space and perhaps not able to perhaps quote these from the right carriers. And it gets a little bit too broad, a little bit too generalized. And then all it takes is that one exclusion just to come to find out that that off-label use of Botox isn't covered, right? And that's a pretty bad surprise. But I think the notion is that folks need to understand there's a general liability, which is your slip and falls, but you have to have an entirely separate policy, a professional liability policy, the equivalent of almost like a med mal or errors and omissions policy, E&O policy, to give you that professional coverage against your professional acts and omissions, which is much different than just the GL policy.
Right.
Not to be confused with your property policy for sure. And then, of course, you have to consider your workers' compensation policy too, which in the state
Right.
of Texas you can opt out of, but
Right.
there is a procedure for doing that as well.
That's right. Yeah, what they call it the business owner policy, or a BOP, BOP, and that includes basically those three: general liability, property, which is the contents of your facility, and then your professional liability. Most of these carriers will be able to provide you all three.
Yeah,
The carrier is the key, like you mentioned. You don't want to call Geico Motorcycle Insurance for Botox coverage. They don't specialize in that area. So you want to be with a company that specializes in our space. And you can find those online, of course, but I do, as Med Spa advisor, we have a couple of companies that we have vetted, and they are very affordable, and they specialize only in this space. So they have the appropriate discounts, and they understand the law of numbers, what risks different procedures are versus others,
yeah,
so they can appropriately charge you.
absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Now, here's a question I'm sure you get all the time. Do I need to be a doctor to open a medical spa? And we talked about some
Right,
of the rules and regs. So how does that apply to the individual that might not be a physician, let's say Texas, perhaps?
right. Well, this is the area that has been up in controversy for quite some time. Over the last several years here in Texas, we've been under the spotlight um, when it comes to medical spas being investigated, and people not quite following Rule 193.17, and um, getting their face on the news.
For sure.
One thing we found, though, is that none of these businesses were physician owned that were in trouble, and none of them were cited for that. Okay. There is a Texas corporate practice of medicine statute in Texas, that's very vaguely written. So it's very hard to decipher what it's saying. Depending on who you talk to and what time of day it is, somebody might tell you that a physician should own the med spa, and somebody might say, well, there's no enforcement of that, and we haven't seen any action in that avenue. And um, the last meeting, excuse me, I was at with the Texas Medical Board, that was a big topic that was up for discussion. And around that table, it was not just myself, it was the medical board, the nursing board, the PA board, NP, lobbyists, derms, plastics, everybody around the table. And the topic was, should a physician own a med spa and be on site at all times? Well, we were able to discuss this for 3 solid hours and came to the conclusion that physicians do not need to own a med spa. And again, we go back to the two words, med and spa. They're hybrid. Maybe they do Botox twice a month. Maybe they're not med, right? Or maybe they're just a pinch and a snippet. Physicians don't want to own these med spas, and they certainly don't want to be on site. They have a job as a medical director. The medical board said, no, we're not going to enforce that. So if the medical board is not enforcing that, that's a pretty big voice.
Yeah, that would certainly be the first investigative authority to go out and
That's right.
produce
And
a.
so I can't tell you that you have to be owned by a physician or you can't. You can do it both ways. Right now in Texas, we're seeing the MSOs. We're seeing those, and you can do that. It's paperwork. Physician owns the medical part of your business, nothing else.
And an MSO stands for?
Management Service Organization.
Exactly right. So for the listener, right? So you have these MSOs, which is an incredibly popular structure really throughout the country. And it's not necessarily a way to skirt the corporate practice of medicine doctrine, but it is a very efficient way to set up a management organization that would presumably be owned by a non-physician. And then the actual medical practice itself is owned by the physician. And the MSO is just merely performing the managerial services, the staffing, training, hiring, scheduling, equipment, procurement, maintenance, all the business,
Advertising.
yes, and marketing. And then, of course, when a procedure is performed that is within the practice of medicine, it's generated by the physician's practice, to which then the MSO drives a fee, essentially, from from operating the facility to enable that patient to come in. And there's obviously a lot more consideration that goes into that, but that's the general gist of what the MSO would do to facilitate.
Right.
So there's a very clear, well-established workaround that's oftentimes used.
Yeah. And I would say, in my experience, more than 85% of the med spas that I've dealt with are not under an MSO. They are under a physician agreement contract where the physician is responsible for the medical practice. They are, and who's hired, who's trained, anybody that does anything medical, any services that are medical, they're over that 100%. But they are paid a supervision fee through a monthly contract. They're not fee splitting. They're not taking a percentage of the business's income. They're paid a flat rate for their supervision and their duties and responsibilities.
Yep, and that's key, right? You don't want to be able to attribute the income to an unlicensed individual to a particular patient. So when folks are paid a flat rate, you don't have a unethical fee sharing arrangement necessarily with an unlicensed medical practitioner. But but like you had said, the key has always seemingly been who has the autonomy over the patient, the safety and the actual procedure that goes into administering the procedure or the treatment itself. And that autonomy has to be kept with the physician. As soon as quote unquote greedy business owner has autonomy over how much Botox is injected and how it is injected, is thought to put the patient at risk for that economic benefit. And so the notion is that a physician who has and retains that autonomy can prevent that risk from
right. And that is the plan. And the physician utilizing their support staff as a mid-level or themselves to do those good faith exams. Those good faith exams are including a history and a physical exam face-to-face or through HIPAA compliant telemedicine.
Absolutely.
And then there's a diagnosis of the issue and a recommendation of treatment and a very detailed plan. So Botox, maybe it's 1 to 10 units in the glabella area. It's not that the patient is just cleared for Botox, but that anybody can just run Wild West on how much they inject. That's not how it works.
Exactly right. So you go back to the TMB rule 193.17, which is pretty good at laying out the requirements, at least from the Texas Medical Board, for being able to facilitate these delegated procedures. And like you're alluding to, the first step is to certainly make sure that you have proper documented protocols, procedures in place. Right? Because I think the notion is just simply that you're taking an individual that's not licensed per se to practice medicine and delegating a medical procedure to him or her underneath the delegated order of a physician, right? So you have to have those written protocols, procedures in place. But like you alluded to, you have to have that prescription. So you have to have that oftentimes mid-level or advanced practitioner first diagnose and prescribe a procedure to then have it delegated from the physician to a non-licensed practitioner.
Well, and we've been fortunate here in Texas. We now have the luxury, since the telemedicine rule passed, of utilizing the video conferencing. There is a third-party company that Med Spa Advisor recommends, and they're called Spa Connect. And they actually employ mid-levels licensed in the state of Texas to kind of step in for those smaller med spas that really can't afford to hire a full-time mid-level to do their new patient good faith exams. And maybe their medical director isn't available as often as they would like them to be. So this third-party company is an on-demand solution for those exams, and they have really helped a lot of these small businesses, these small med spas, be able to stay afloat by charging a nominal fee per exam. Med Spa Advisor definitely has vetted this company, and we feel very comfortable with what they do, and we even have a special rate for our clients from them. Yeah.
That's a fantastic thing. And then that's a huge relief, I think, to a potential spa operator to know that type of resource is out there. Obviously, a full-time nurse practitioner PA, or perhaps even two, to cover the more than 40 hours a week of medical spas in operation is a very good tool.
Yeah.
But no,
And it's even, they even have a day before exam. So they may not even need to be in your facility. They can get the exam done from the patient's home or office. And that saves administrative time for you as a med spa, because if they're not a candidate, then you don't have to worry about them coming in and spending the time in your practice and the hourly rates that you're paying people to service them when they're not actually a candidate.
yeah, no, exactly right. So they receive this physician, the prescriptions through MedSpa, or Spa Connect. And then normally the next question is, well, do I have to have that prescription done every time this individual comes in, right?
Right. And that's a great question. And thank God the answer is no. We are looking at this as an annual exam. Now, if there's a treatment that's the practice of medicine that was not examined for, let's say you only got an exam for Botox and then you want now dermal fillers, you would need another exam. The purpose of the exam is to review what the patient's concerns are that they're a candidate for and recommend the treatment or treatments that would help them achieve their optimal outcome. So there may be more than one recommendation in that detailed written treatment plan.
That makes sense, right? Yeah, so it's an annual exam. That's actually set by the Board of Pharmacy in Texas, where a prescription is valid for up to 1 year. And
That's
then
right.
the exam itself from Spa Connect, I believe if you indicate to the nurse practitioner PA more than one treatment indication, they will issue a prescription for more than one indication at that consultation. However, if it's not, they're not going to just clear someone with a blanket order, right? They're not going to say, oh, okay, you're cleared for these 15
That's right.
procedures.
Yeah, no, it needs to be specific to the patient's concerns
Exactly
at
right.
that time. Right.
And they do a nice job. You get on the telemedicine application, it's proprietary to them. They do a nice walkthrough, a nice evaluation, go down a wonderful procedure, and ensure that the safety is at paramount concern for the patients. It's a very nice service that they perform. Very cool. All
Yeah.
right, we've talked about a good, you know, half dozen roughly regulatory agencies, authorities in the state of Texas that folks need to be aware of, which is fantastic. Certainly a little bit about the corporate practice of medicine, ownership. What's that physician's role like as a medical director? You mentioned they're on site occasionally. Are they auditing charts? What is
Yeah.
with procedures and protocols?
Well, the Medical Board Rule 19317 has a quality assurance section, and that is for the physicians, because remember, they are 100% responsible for everything that is under their license and who they're delegating. So the physician must be trained, including hands-on training in any of these procedures that they're delegating.
Absolutely.
And the physician must be able to observe these procedures to ensure that they're being fulfilled properly by those delegates, whether it's the nurse injector or the laser tech doing an IPL photofacial, whatever it is. The doctor can then make their decision on how often they want to physically over the shoulder these individuals. Let's say they just learned microneedling. Maybe the doctor wants to observe them monthly until they feel more comfortable. Maybe somebody has been injecting for 20 years and maybe they want to watch them once a year.
Yep.
But the chart signing is very important. If it's somebody who is an unlicensed individual, the Medical Board Rule 19317 makes it clear that the physician, not the mid-levels, but the physician is responsible for signing every single one of those charts. So if that person did 20 photofacials in a week, there's 20 cosigns from the doctor.
Yep.
Now, that doctor can certainly use an EMR system and have their own login and review charts if it's electronic medical records, which is handy. Or if not, then when they make their rounds and come to your facility, which needs to be within the month, every month. Some of them come weekly, bi-weekly. It just depends on the doctor. But they would have a stack of charts flagged for them to sign.
Makes perfect sense. Not bad. So that's the medical director for sure. We've talked, and our website I think alludes to and we have a whole other section dedicated to laser hair removal, which is its own regulatory process with 4 different licensure requirements and the facility requirements. So folks can certainly look at that video for LHR particularly. From a med spa consulting side, from a regulatory overview, are there any other considerations that a prospective owner should be aware of? from the outset at least?
Well, a prospective owner means somebody that's trying to get involved in this space. Um, they need to understand there's several things, and what MedSpa Advisor does is try to help you avoid bumping into a rule you didn't know about or falling into a pitfall and having to climb yourself out of it. My experience, I've been in the business since 2004. I've run multiple med spas, built them from the ground up. And of course, I spent time in education. And remember, I was vice president and dean of education for Texas Laser Institute. I've had a wealth of knowledge through all of my years of experience to share with these prospective owners and help them. Maybe they don't understand the electrical requirements and the HVAC requirements just to install a laser in their facility.
Sure.
You know, there's little tips and tricks that I provide through through our consulting to show them this is a company that'll help you with your social media and get you going marketing wise. I can help you too. If I don't have the answer, I have somebody that does, but I plug them into equipment companies, manufacturers, and we're not married to any company. We recommend many different companies, but our goal is to help them by holding their hand and walk them through unraveling the confusing spaghetti bowl of starting up a med spa and the regulatory aspect as well.
That's a great first place to stop, for sure. That sounds great. I think that's a pretty good overview of the rules and regulations, at least from that bird's eye view.
Yeah.
Folks to get aware of. I mean, in 30 minutes, it's a nice little overview of what folks need at least to be familiar with and know what to inquire further into. So that's fantastic.
And the reason why you want to get compliant is in the event that you get an inspection. And inspections aren't coming from patients complaining, they're coming from your competitors. They're jealous, unfortunately, jealous and greed. They will see you pop up your shop and they're going to come in there and shop you and see what you're doing. And if they feel like you're not compliant, they're going to turn you in. And then it's your job to follow through with the complaint process, which could take months, depends on what kind of complaint was filed. So when you get compliant, that gives you that peace of mind that when they do come in for an inspection, you already have this information in your compliance binder that we show you how to create, and that your charts are put together the appropriate way, whether they're paper or EMR, sure, so that you can go through that inspection process with the confidence, knowing that you've got everything you need right there at your fingertips.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So how do folks get a hold of you for the next steps?
We are on the web. medspaadvisor.com is a really good place to go in. You can submit a contact form. Our emails are there. Facebook, our Facebook page is something that I think everybody should pay attention to. We post for free a lot of business information for just tips and tricks on your business and help you. And that's MedSpa Advisor on Facebook. You just go in and type it in and like the page, and you'll see all kinds of great information and different things like this podcast you may see here in the future on our site.
Absolutely. We've seen some job announcements up there as well. So I think MedSpa does a wonderful job of helping its clients and, of course, students from TLI and other industry participants to find gainful employment opportunities, which is great.
Yeah. We've got our hand in pretty much every little aspect of the med spa space you can imagine. Through ourselves and through our network. We do our best to make sure that any customer that comes to MedSpa Advisor is completely satisfied.
Absolutely. I know we spoke pretty directly of Texas rules and regs, but you guys have done a lot of work in other states as well, as folks continue to expand their own practices.
Yeah. It's very different in navigating those waters. You would be surprised how different states are. Missouri is like the Wild West. Anybody can do anything there. So, but you have, Texas is one of the more strict states. We do have a couple of spots that were a little loose, but, California, Florida, those are also more strict states. We've now investigated 25 states, and we have a couple more on the horizon. we do charge a fee for our research, and our research is extensive. It takes a minimum of 8 weeks for us to provide a research report. But we look at all these questions that we've talked about today. Who can own a med spa? What treatments are the practice of medicine, right? Who can perform those treatments? Some states you have to be an RN or above.
Yeah, that makes
And so we look at all that, and we provide our clients a report. So if they're thinking about opening a med spa, they understand, wow, mine does have to be physician owned, because it does in certain states. And so not every state has the corporate practice of medicine, but many do. And so we have to look at that and see how they're enforcing it, and who can do what. And many states are very similar to ours as far as the process. Our TMB Rule 19317 literally was created based on how Washington State does theirs. So yeah. So anyway, we do our best on that, and from there we can help them through the webinars, OSHA and whatnot. Just depends on what they need, and we'll help them. We do, like you said, job postings, and we also help find medical directors, which is a big business. But we will not find you a medical director if you're not compliant. So we won't put that risk on the doctor as a blind date where we're introducing you. We don't know if you're compliant to a doctor who may not know the rules. And we don't want the responsibility here at Med Spa Advisor of somebody connecting through us that is at risk.
And I'm sure your physician partners probably appreciate the initial screening and competency check.
They certainly do. And then we do medical director training and workshops so that they can understand what their duties and responsibilities are. Many of them don't understand that.
Very, very true. Yeah, it's a great way to supplement their income as well, which is wonderful. And they get to participate in a wonderful industry. Very cool. I think that's a great way to sum up that every state is very much individual. Medicine's regulated at the state level, as is insurance. And what applies in Texas is certainly and can be much different right across our state line. So it's important to become very proficient in the rules and regs in the actual state, and maybe down to the city in which you're operating your business.
That's true.
Very
That's
cool.
true. Yeah.
Well, not bad. Well, I think for folks in our viewership, I think they're going to really appreciate this nice overview of and a crash course and some of the considerations that they're going to have to take into account when opening and operating a medical spa. They know how to get a hold of you for sure, how to find you. So
yeah,
I encourage folks.
www.medspaadvisor.com.
Fantastic.
Love to see you.
Reach out to Krista. She'll be more than happy to give you a wonderful introduction, and of course, get you on the way to being compliant with these many rules and regulations, at least familiar with what's out there, and get you pointed in the right direction.
Perfect.
I think that's fantastic. Well, Krista, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. Allow us to leverage your expertise to the benefit of our student body. I know they're really going to enjoy hearing some of these nuggets.
Yes.
We'll send them your way.
I certainly appreciate your time. You've got a wonderful school. As you know, I was a part of it for many years, and it's got a very dear spot in my heart.
Yes, ma'am.
And a great education program there. So, of course, we definitely refer clients to you, training, and we will continue to do so.
I certainly appreciate it. It's a wonderful pleasure being able to work with you. So, yeah, thank you so much again.